A very good morning, afternoon, and evening to all of you. To begin with, I'd like to wish each one of you a very happy new year. It's the 22nd of January, and at the speed at which we already are, unbelievable that we've completed 3 weeks. Today, Sanam S4 welcomes you for the last session of this series, the final episode on the kindness season, talking about defining worth by more than just a number. In our final episode of this season, we will deep dive into the challenges that students face when seeking admissions into high-ranking universities, the stress of competition, and we talk about how to guide students when they don't make those numbers. With cutthroat competition today, what does the future hold for us? For students who score in mid to lower levels, coping with COVID disruptions, online learnings, deferrals, and more. Without further ado, on behalf of Sanam S4, it is my very privilege to welcome our panel of experts from the University of Derby and Victoria University, along with our moderator, Dr. Surbhi Modi Sahai. Very briefly giving an introduction for each one of them. Richard Syed is the Associate Director International for the University of Derby in the UK. He's leading the international agenda across partnerships, student recruitment and engagement. He's worked in the UK higher education sector for 16 years, holding similar or related positions at Oxford Brookes University and the Royal Holloway University of London. He previously worked in the English language teaching sector as a teacher, teacher trainer, author, and principal in Sudan, Greece, and in the UK. Our second panelist, Mr. Prashant Prasanna, Regional Recruitment Manager, Victoria University. Prashant is an international student recruitment specialist with a decade of successful experience in recruiting thousands of international students for their studies in Australia. He has significant knowledge about Australian international education as a sector. He's worked in different roles, both in private and the public sector. Prashant has recruited international students from different parts of the world. However, he specializes in international student recruitment from South Asia. Being an international student himself 14 years ago, Prashant graduated with an MBA degree specializing in marketing. Prashant understands the sentiments, emotions, and the struggles that international students go through when in a foreign country, and he uses his own experience to guide them in Australia. Last but not the least, Dr. Surbhi Modi Sahai, CEO of Possible Education. Dr. Modi Sahai is a Hindu College alumni who set the skeleton framework for the academic of CLAT Possible and Team Satyam. She was also nominated for the Fulbright Teaching Fellowship to the University of California in 2009. A true mentor to thousands of students, she not only is the face of CLAT Possible and Team Satyam, but also the trusted face for good advice. She completed her PhD in English literature from the University of Lucknow. It was a historic day at Lucknow when Mr. Vishal Bharadwaj, the filmmaker many Indians would know, came to attend the PhD viva of Dr. Surbhi Modi Sahai in defense of her thesis on the adaptation of Shakespeare's play, Maqbool Omkara Haider. Without further ado, I will pass it on to Dr. Surbhi Modi Sahai.
Thank you so much, Ritika and Sanam S4, for this opportunity. I'll be very honest, when I saw the theme for these workshops and discussions defining worth by more than just a number, I did not hesitate to take this opportunity and moderate this session with Mr. Syed and Mr. Prasanna. And just to give you a brief background, I work with students who want to prepare for entrance tests, mainly for Indian exams. But I do also have students who come in and who take advice from us when they want to write the SATs or GMAT. And I work somewhere in between their school and the universities which they join. And this theme is very, very close to my heart because I have seen many a heartbreak and many a dream shatter, in spite of the fact that the student has been extremely promising in school, to the, many times where school principals and counselors have rung me up and have wanted to find out what is it that their student lacked. So this nebulae of numbers and algorithms that selects a candidate has been very, very mysterious to at least many Indian school teachers, principals, and counselors. And no matter how hard we've tried to demystify it, it has actually gathered more dust, as if we can use that metaphor, for the pandemic. And with a sudden overnight change in student pattern studies and the way education could be made possible with technology, I think, I'm not sure about all South Asian students, but at least Indian students have sort of, hit a wall, and many do feel deprived because of not their fault, but fault of infrastructure, and the fault of all those dropped Zoom conferences because their network could not hold it. So I want to, rationalize this subject and give a perspective on India and Indian candidates, and a person who has been working and who's still working closely with students who are doing everything possible to meet all these entrance exam requirements. And last year we saw so many exams get postponed with no dates in, sudden postponement, and no near dates in mind. And students were constantly struggling with when the exam would happen, how it would happen. And many exams were held online. In India, we do still have offline papers, pen and paper tests, and many students struggled with that. So this year, we see a lot of students who are at home with no clear future in sight. So speaking on behalf of these students, and I hope it is also the question and is also in the minds of many principals and concerned teachers who worry about their students and who want them to go to a good college. So I think we can start the discussion on this premise of anyway problems of meeting scores to study in good universities, and B, add to it the pandemic, which is not going anywhere soon. And 21 continues the way 20 has been, and students are already harassed about how the exams would still take place with vaccine drives not going at the pace that they should be going. So the stress of competition, lack of adequate technological means, and anyway, the pressure that has been ongoing of meeting the scores and numbers that are the demands of the good universities, whether it's the UK or Australia or even the US. So with that, I would like to invite Mr. Said. I've given him a lot of themes to talk about, but I'm sure he will be able to address at least some of them. So over to you, sir.
Thank you very much indeed. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are in the world. It's morning here. It's a nice, bright, sunny, but very cold morning here in the UK. As you know, I'm from the University of Derby in the UK. Derby's right in the centre of England. But I'll be speaking, I think, not just on behalf of Derby, because the experience that Derby has been going through for the last year, nearly a year now, is reflected in other universities across the UK and, of course, around the world. So I am not making any claim that what we are doing in Derby is unique. However, it is interesting, I think, how different universities have reacted differently in slightly different ways. And I think one of the things that we have learned from this pandemic is how countries have acted differently from each other. It's a source of some sadness that perhaps we could not collaborate better, and that sometimes COVID-19 has become another source of criticism of other countries rather than a catalyst for international collaboration. However, that's not a problem for us to solve. What I'm going to talk about for the next 15 minutes or so, I thought it would be helpful to give some context, and I will obviously be doing this mainly from a Derby perspective because that's where I've been most closely involved, about how as a university we reacted to this pandemic, what we've done, and the impact of it, particularly on our students, on their academic achievement, on their health, their mental health, and indeed, let's not forget the health and the mental health of the staff as well. We are all, I think, exhausted by all of this. We are all working harder than we've ever worked in our lives, because we want the student experience to be the best that we possibly can give. So perhaps let me just wind you back a little bit and give an overall perspective on some of this. And if we go back to from the UK, looking at what it looked like. So March, we went into lockdown, quite a tight lockdown in March of 2020. And that stayed in place for a few months. And then things seemed to be getting a little bit better in terms of COVID. The numbers were going down, coming right down over the summer, and we started to open things up a bit over the summer. A lot of people going on holiday, going down to the beaches, the pubs, the restaurants were open. There were a few scientists giving warnings saying, hang on, wait for the winter, it's going to get an awful lot worse. Are you sure about this? And we went, no, come on, it's going to be fine, don't worry about it. So September started, we had a lot of things in place in the university to make sure that students were safe. And then over the November, December, numbers started to rise, and then numbers started to rise alarmingly. And then they discovered that there was a new strain of the virus that was very prevalent, particularly in southeast of England. And so we've kind of gone back into a lockdown again. So that's the overall sort of U-shaped curve in the UK, and that's reflected in many other countries. And I don't know which wave we're on at the moment. It's either the second or the third. But let me go back to March 2020. And I think it would be helpful because of the impact on students to talk about a little bit about what we did. Within Derby, we moved entirely online, and we did that within 1 week. The logistics of this were astonishing. The buildings, the campus buildings were all closed apart from a few security staff. Nobody went into those buildings for a few months. But university itself never closed. We continued to teach throughout that period, and we have continued to teach right the way through. It kind of helps from a University of Derby perspective that Derby's got a reputation as one of the best in the UK online providers, and that we've been doing this for years. So we had quite a bit of experience in this. So it wasn't entirely new. But what we did was immediately establish some guiding principles of how to deliver academically during the period of lockdown. And of course, going back to March, we never knew, and we still don't know, how long it's going to go on. So there's been a sort of prevailing optimism, I think, from everybody in many ways around the world, saying, well, we'll just get to August, or we'll just get to October, or we'll just get to Christmas, or we'll just get to, and so on. So we're kind of looking at 1 month, 3 month short-term periods, and we think we're going to come out of it. We'll see. But the guiding principles that we put in place, first of all, the safety of our students was absolutely paramount. And the safety of our staff as well, naturally. Secondly, the quality of the education that we were delivering should not be compromised. We needed to continue to deliver high quality education, whatever. The third pillar really was the student experience. What was it like? What would it be like for students to study? And I suppose it's this third element, which was where the compromises obviously had to be made. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. But the safety and the quality, we were making no compromises on that whatsoever. One of the things we then had to do was get a command structure, because things were moving so fast and the scale of what we had to do was so huge that we had to get a command structure in place. The normal governance committees, groups, executives of the university were adapted so that we had what we called Gold Command, which was the Vice Chancellor of the university and about 5 or 6 other senior members of the university, was meeting on a daily basis from March through to September. An academic task group was set up, of which I'm a member, to talk about how we delivered academically. And there was a business continuity group which looked at wider aspects such as the estates and IT and all of those kinds of areas, and meeting on a regular basis. The academic task group met 3 times a week for 2-hour meetings every time. So this is very, very time consuming. Staff, we reckon, were doing about 40% more every day of additional work. So there's a lot of work involved in this. And if you think about the logistics, if you're moving online, everybody needs access to a computer. Not all of our students had access to a computer in their homes. We therefore had to put a laptop loan system in place. What about libraries? How do they access the library if the buildings are closed? We had to work out how to do all of that online. Staff training. Not every teacher knows, not every academic lecturer knows how to deliver online. So we had to put that staff training in place. What about the student accommodation? What about those who had no homes to go back to? Either UK students, because perhaps they came from difficult backgrounds, or international students. What about the exams? How do we deliver the exams when you can't get the students onto campus? What about graduation? What about the campus at this time? The campus was closed. We actually had a testing centre, a COVID testing centre in our car park. But it was very difficult to think beyond the immediate term. We were always thinking, what do we do next? What's happening next week? What's happening at the end of this semester? And we never really had the time and the capacity to think longer term. And some staff, I'll be honest, took this perhaps more seriously than they should. Some staff, for example, were complaining about what about the cost of the extra electricity they were using in their homes? I think they kind of missed the point a little bit here. They were saving on commuting costs after all. And the mental health of our staff and students was a serious concern. And we spent a lot of time talking about what to put in place with personal tutors, with making sure that all students had access to help. Interestingly, though, towards the end of that semester, we did run a student satisfaction survey with all of our students, which was how satisfied, general question, how satisfied are you with your program? It actually, the student satisfaction increased, improved during lockdown. We had 82% of our students who were satisfied with the delivery of their program, whereas the previous parallel semester, it had been 73. So I can't really account for this. I think it's probably a vote of satisfaction by the students in how we reacted to the pandemic, the speed with which we reacted, and that, importantly, ensuring that no student's academic or health was compromised. As we then worked through the summer, moving towards September, things were looking a bit better. Clearly, the safety was still a concern. Clearly, there's still a pandemic out there. However, the numbers of COVID are relatively low, so we decided we opened the campus. A lot of our delivery was still online. It was important to make sure that we kept contact between staff and students to each other as low as we could to reduce infection rates. Again, quality, safety, experience was absolutely central. Making the campus safe, we spent somewhere around £1.5 million adapting our campus, putting up perspex screens, for example, in the cafe areas between tables so that students could still talk to each other, making sure that there was space between all the tables and chairs in communal areas, making sure that there was enough space between students in teaching areas, We adapted many of the rooms. My office disappeared overnight and was knocked through. It literally disappeared. The walls of my office disappeared and became part of a classroom, as we ensured that all students, when they were studying, were at least 2 meters apart from each other. We had to adapt office space into additional teaching space. And I think that shows our commitment to students. We also decided that all students should have at least 3 hours per week face-to-face teaching. And that was a promise we kept. So although lectures, for example, were all online, a lot of personal tuition was face-to-face. And students very much appreciated that. Students actually wanted more face-to-face teaching, and we were starting very gently to ease some of the restrictions, and very, very cautiously to do that. One of the issues then we faced towards September was, what about international students? Students around the world experience all sorts of difficulties. For example, how do they prove their English language competence when the IELTS centres are closed? How can they get references and authenticated certificates from their home universities when those universities are closed? We made a lot of adaptations to our admissions processes as a result of that. We took the risk sometimes that, yes, we will accept this student, whereas normally we wouldn't accept that student. We took the risk that they can't get all of their qualifications, but under the circumstances, we will take that risk and we will accept. And I think that was appreciated. It's interesting to see how recruitment of international students to the UK varied over this period. India remained strong. Some African countries remained strong. The Middle East really almost collapsed. China struggled. Southeast Asia, really nobody was traveling anywhere. So it varied a lot from one area of the world to another. One of the controversial things then was that as students all from the UK and internationally moved into universities in September, there was a massive peak of COVID cases in some university cities. Luckily, not so much in Derby, but some neighbouring cities, which a couple of which have more than one university in, saw a very massive increase in COVID. That died away pretty quickly, I have to say. And when we finished at the end of the semester in December, we tested all of our students on campus, as did most other universities, before they went home. And in the University of Derby, there were fewer than 10 positive cases of COVID among our student population. So it came and it went quite quickly. We put in all sorts of additional social events as well. We had a socially distanced Freshers' Fair. We had a socially distanced Freshers' Party at the beginning of the semester, where we had students all wearing specially designed laser belts, which threw a laser light around them on the floor, which was 1 meter in diameter. So you always knew when you were about to invade somebody else's space. Quite a spectacular sight. We had students traveling from all over the world who necessarily needed to go into self-isolation on arrival. An issue, of course, for some students coming in when they didn't have international credit cards. How do they get food? How do they look after themselves? We had special accommodation blocks for international students where they could self-isolate. We delivered food, and we didn't charge students for that accommodation. We delivered food parcels to all students free of charge within their isolation period. We provided airport pickups to transport them from London Heathrow or from Manchester Airport into Derby to go to their self-isolation accommodation, where they had to stay at that stage for 2 weeks. It's now down to 10 days. We also had one person within our student welfare body who was dedicated to the welfare of international students, their health and their mental health, and looking after any students who had any issues at all. As we move towards January, well, we're in January, but our teaching at University of Derby starts on Monday. So some students have been arriving. The situation in the UK at the moment is that we're in a lockdown. It's not the strictest of lockdowns. Food shops are open, non-essential shops are closed, pubs, restaurants are closed. You can travel for work. Some schools are open, but they're open in a limited way for the children of essential workers. The university at the moment is starting all of its teaching remotely, and we are thinking that we will stay delivery remotely for all of our programs until mid to late February. And that is across all universities in the UK, and that is a government directive. There are some exceptions to that where hands-on teaching is absolutely essential. For example, in nursing, you can't teach nursing remotely. You just can't. Understandably, interestingly, our applications for nursing at the University of Derby in the last year have absolutely gone through the roof. We are getting so many nursing applications. Nurses are obviously seen now as heroes, and everybody wants to be a nurse. It's brilliant. We love it. So we will be studying remotely until late February. There's a feeling of here we go again. I have to say we're a lot better at it this time, at this January entry of our students for our January start, than we were in September. In September, we were kind of making it up as we went along. It was all new. We had some problems in enrolling students because normally when you enroll an international student, you come along with a passport, your visa, we see you, we check things, it's fine. But how do you do that if the student's studying remotely? So we had to change all our processes. It involves departments across the university all having to communicate with each other in ways that they're not used to. Yes, we made mistakes. Yes, sometimes it got a bit slow and very, very frustrating. But I think under the circumstances, what we managed to do was fairly extraordinary. And in January now, as we're enrolling students as we speak, I have to say we're a lot better at it. We're all exhausted. We all want the end of this, but we're much better at it. There's still a number of challenges there. One of the issues we always have is reacting to last-minute changes, last-minute directives from the government. The government, and I don't think the UK government is unique in this by any means, tends to change things at sort of around 8:30 on a Monday evening and expect everybody to change everything almost immediately. You've got a day or two to adapt. So we had very good plans in place in December of how we were going to open for our January enrolments. We came back at the beginning of January, all those plans had to change. All that planning that we did in December was no longer of any use whatsoever. So it's reacting fast to those last minute changes. I think there's a degree of frustration, and one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about what universities have been doing is to help people understand what is going on behind the scenes. A lot of it is invisible. If you're applying to a university or you're helping one of your students to apply to your university, you kind of expect a very fast turnaround service. You would expect things to go very smoothly. Under the current circumstances, it has to be said, they have not always gone smoothly. However, I think one of the things that I would say is that the University of Derby has always been aware, and my job at the university is to make the university aware of all the issues from an international perspective, as all our international students from around the world come to Derby, to ensure that nobody is treated in any way that is detrimental to their admissions or to their experience in the university. One of the things about University of Derby is It's a university which is used to dealing with non-standard students, if you like. Not all of our students are 18-year-old undergraduates coming from around the country. We have a lot of part-time students. We have a lot of older, mature students. We have a lot of students in the UK from disadvantaged backgrounds. So we are used to dealing with all sorts of different students, and international students, again, for us, perhaps non-standard. It's a minority of our students, but the important thing for us is that we treat all students equally. We don't make special preferences for any particular group of students. If we do something special for international students, we have to make sure that that is compatible and equal with all of the provision that we have for our UK students as well. It's important always to be fair. It's important, as I said at the beginning, to keep those guiding principles there. The safety of our students, the quality of our academic delivery, and as much as we are able, and this is always the bit that's going to be compromised, it is the experience of our students while they are studying with us should be the best possible experience that they can have. Thank you very much. I'll stop there and happy to take questions later.
Thank you so much, Mr. Syed. You covered a whole range of, thoughts on how the universities are bracing up for this new normal. Maybe, we can talk about the new normal later on in the question and answer session. And of course, someone had to bring forward the struggle of the other side, while I covered only the student struggle in my opening address. So thank you so much for that. And I'm sure it'll be much appreciated by students and school teachers across, at least in India. There will be a couple of questions, I hope, from the audience. Otherwise, I do have some questions lined up for you, which I will be taking up at the end of Mr. Prasanna's address. So over to Mr. Prasanna now. And I hope he will be answering some of the questions that were raised in my opening lines as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sahai. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. And I hope you and your families are safe and well in this present situation. Thank you, Sanamas, for giving us this opportunity to present on this platform. Interesting year, as we all know, 2020 has been extremely interesting. It's been rough and tough, but definitely, 2021 will be, well, we call it as the year of vaccination. So let's hope, things go in the right direction. Look, I'm from Victoria University. We are a university based out of Melbourne in Australia. So I will definitely share my experience as to how we as a university battled through this situation and what we are currently doing as such. So yes, March 2020 was when the borders were shut down in Australia. So incoming flights were all stopped as a result of the rising COVID-19 infections as such. A series of lockdowns were put in place, and I, being in Melbourne, can definitely tell you that we were part of the strictest lockdowns in the whole world as such, and these lockdowns kept changing. A point came in, I would say in June, where we did manage to get out of the lockdown for a bit, but again, we were put back into a lockdown. There were restrictions like only 2 people were allowed to leave the house. We couldn't travel more than 5 kilometers from where we live. Public transport, there was no one using public transportation facilities. So it was a bit hard. And all of our students and all the staff the staff were working from home since March, and the students were basically, they commenced remote learning the moment the lockdowns were announced in March 2020. Now, it was a bit difficult in the beginning, but we, being a very young university, we were very resilient and we managed to move everything to the online space as such. Generally, the feedback very recently has been very positive with the online learning, because there is a couple of new things that Victoria University introduced and is known for using this methodology to deliver education to the international students. We did receive a lot of support from the Victorian government as such, where funds amounting to $45 million were set aside for the well-being of international students. And we as a university as well went through the phase where we announced emergency relief grants, crisis housing support funds to support the well-being of our international students. Talking about what Victoria University did to battle through this is, again, all our classes were basically moved online. We started delivering classes using platforms like Zoom, WebEx, Microsoft Teams, and so on. We ensured that all our classes are basically live, so this one-on-one interaction is possible between the students and the academic faculty. And also, where we were really successful is we use something called as a block learning model to deliver our undergraduate, and very soon we'll be also using this method to deliver our post-graduation courses as well. Studying online is a challenge. It's not that easy. I can tell you, when we did move online in July 2020, there were a lot of questions as such, and students they weren't ready to go online as such. But then the most common questions that we faced are, we do not want to undertake 3 units, we do not want to undertake 4 units online. Can you make it a bit more flexible for us? Is there an opportunity for me to look at 1 or 2 units? I think with this block model, we definitely had this opportunity to do so, because again, well-being of the students is something that we as a university were really concerned about. So with this block learning model, how it basically works is, rather than undertaking all the units at the same time, the students have an opportunity to focus on just 1 unit at a time. So the student enrolls into the program, they commence a unit, they undertake intense study for the first 3 weeks. In the last weeks, they undertake the exams, and the results are given to them in 3 working days. What this does is, the student very clearly at the end of the unit knows where he or she stands from an academic perspective. And also what this did is this also pushed up our pass rates. If you look at our pass rates in the undergraduate area, we're currently at 92%. The higher distinction rates are at 55% and above. So I think this model really helped us this model really helped us to help our international students undertake those studies as such. Again, we are definitely looking at introducing this to our post-graduation study model as well, which is going to commence from next year. Look, it's been a very tough situation for all the students, but we ensure that we are always available to the students. We're doing whatever we can to help the students as such. Unfortunately, the borders are closed at the moment. I think Australia is working towards eradicating this. Having said that, we are in a good situation at the moment. In Victoria, I think it's been almost 16 days we've had no cases of local transmission. Australia in general is doing very well with the whole COVID-19 scenario. One of the other things we also did is, yes, of course, we understand when a student is studying online, the results are definitely not going to be the same as you would expect it to be face-to-face. There's a lot of things that the students are missing out on. What we do is, we have specific entry requirements. Say, for example, if a student has a particular percentage, he or she has an opportunity to step directly into an undergraduate program as such. So for the students who don't meet that cut, we have something called as a foundation or a package program, where the student gets an opportunity to go via a diploma pathway. So what this does is, a diploma pathway is where we basically lay the foundation for the student and provide them the stepping stone into the university as such. So I think through this, the package programs, the block learning models, the foundation programs and the diploma programs, we are certainly able to service the international students as such. Counseling and other support services are provided to the students and staff on a very regular basis. We ensure that we are constantly in touch with them. We have been conducting a lot of well-being seminars with the students and the staff on a very regular basis to understand what sort of support is needed. So I think in a nutshell, this is what we as a university have been doing during this tough period to ensure that our stakeholders are looked after. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Prasanna. And in fact, in both your addresses, you mentioned resounding feedback, and in spite of the sessions being conducted remotely. So that is really news to me and quite uplifting. While I wait for the questions, I announce the house open for all our listeners and our attendees. So please do write in your questions in the Q&A box. And while we wait for the questions, I will take the liberty to ask the first question. Are the universities braced up for this new normal? Even with the vaccinations, one doesn't know where we will be in the future. And though it looks not as grim as it looked in 2020, at least in India, most of the things have started opening up, and most of us have started sessions in person, and many states have started school as well. So, but yet, this is going to be a new normal. So do you think the universities are braced up for this new normal? Would the new normal entail some sessions in person and some sessions conducted remotely? And do you see a dip in international student intake in the future, at least for a couple of years, considering how everyone is so uncertain right now?
Shall I start on that one?
Yeah.
So as I said, one of the issues that we face here is that because everybody is working flat out over and above their normal workload in order simply to deliver the next couple of months, it's very difficult to find the time to do the kind of longer term strategic thinking that we really need to do. We just haven't got the capacity for it. It's really quite a struggle. I'm being completely honest here. I think you're right in that there is a degree of new normal. We at Derby are quite clear that our preference and our students' preference is for at least some on-campus face-to-face teaching. I think we're quite clear that for most students, the overwhelming majority of students, being entirely online is not what they want to go to university for, generally speaking. There are always exceptions to that, and there are some people, and Derby delivers to these, entirely online around the world. So we are always looking for ways in which we can continue to deliver at least some face-to-face teaching. However, as I also said, we've just spent £1.5 million on adapting our campus to make sure that it is safe. We are not going to spend that kind of money just for the next 3 weeks. There has to be some kind of long-term commitment to that, and that is behind why we did what we did. So we are looking at our current blended learning model of a combination of on-campus and remote delivery. One of the things that we've learned from this is actually, I think around the world, everybody's learned that actually some of this remote stuff is easier to deliver and actually even better to deliver remotely than it is to face. And I think a sign of failure in many ways for us is if let's project ourselves forward a year, maybe 2 years, maybe 6, let's not be too pessimistic though, when there is no COVID or everyone's vaccinated or we've decided to live with it, it would be a sign of failure if we go back to exactly what it was before. We won't have learned anything. And for example, working from home, some of the meetings that we have are actually much better with 20 people online remotely with Zoom or Teams or whatever it is than people crowding into a room and trying to get the attention of whoever the chair is. So there are some learning advantages there, I think. And we will learn from that. I think in part of your other question, how has this affected international students coming to the UK? I think it was very varied. So we've experienced increases from some areas, including India. We've experienced decreases in other areas. Southeast Asia has been right down, for example. So it is quite a complex picture there. Looking at this January now, and I'm looking at the numbers in front of me, actually our international student recruitment is better than it was for January 2020. So there's all sorts of interesting things going on there. And also internationally, I have to say again, our applications for nursing have massively increased, particularly from Africa. So there are some positives coming out of this as well. But I take your point, the long term, is this the new normal? I'm not entirely sure, because I think our definition of normal at the moment is pretty much changing from one week to another.
Thank you so much. Would you want to add something to this, Mr. Prasanna? I mean, of course, there are lots of learnings from here. Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Sai, thank you. I think it's a very good opportunity for the universities and the whole world to learn from this, and I think it's good to be prepared. And I have a feeling that some sort of a hybrid model will definitely come into existence as such. When I say a hybrid model, I think there's definitely going to be that demand for face-to-face classes, that face-to-face interaction. And Australia as a destination, I think, has a lot of fan base and a fan following. So we'll definitely see, yes, once the borders do open, and of course, when it is safe to do so, we will see that inflow of the students coming back in. And I think universities will start adapting to this model where a percentage or a part of the classes could be delivered online. And then you would have that majority of the classes where you would go face to face. And I think networking is something which is would be very important. Online is good, but of course, the things that you can achieve when you meet face to face is definitely a lot than what you could do online as such. So I think some sort of a hybrid model is definitely going to come into existence. And also, talking about the dip in international students, yes, we definitely foresee that happening. But again, personally, I think there is a lot of factors that go beyond that. Yes, on one hand, Australia as a country is still yet to open the borders, but then on the other hand, the pandemic has affected a lot of people. I mean, families are struggling, the incomes have been affected. So there are a lot of these external factors as well, which are beyond our control. I would say, I think the next 2021 is going to be an interesting year. It's going to be a year to watch out for, but I'm sure international education will definitely make a comeback. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And before we go ahead, Dr. Sahai, just a couple of things. There are some questions which have come in the question answer section. And also I've noticed, I think some participants have raised their hands, probably would want to ask a question. So I'm going to just request Ms. Owiji if you could just put down your question in the Q&A box and we will address it. Over to you, sorry, Dr. Sahai.
Yes, we do have a question in the QA box from Elizabeth Joseph, and that's a very relevant question. In fact, that was the question I had put it down myself, had that not been asked by the audience. What will be the future of internship programs in universities, and how will they be executed? So I would leave it to either of our panelists to take that up.
I think it's a very good question, and it's not an easy question to give an answer to. The point being, I think at the moment we don't really know. There are some areas, it depends a little bit on the subject area. Again, if you look at the health related subject areas where internship is an integral part of the program, we are really following government guidelines. So there are some areas where we can still deliver these internships, and we have to deliver the internships because they're part of the program. Where the internship is more voluntary, it becomes a little bit more difficult to do. At the moment, we're really limited on what we can do. And similarly with a lot of our field travel that is part of the program, where, for example, geography, geology courses and people traveling overseas, really all of that's been cancelled. So it's a mixed picture, and I think it depends really on the subject area.
Thank you so much for that answer, Mr. Sahil. So I've requested our attendees to put the questions in the QA box, and I think we have one more question here. What are the challenges that we foresee after the pandemic in terms of the competition from other countries in recruiting aggressively?
Uh, I'm happy to take that question. I think we already are seeing the competition as such. There are a lot of challenges. Definitely, every country has its own challenges as such. So the competition will continue. I think we'll have to just end up adapting to the new normal, which is the COVID normal. Uh, yeah, that's all I have to say. It's very difficult for me to answer the question right now because we still Australia as a country is trying to play it safe at the moment. But like I said, I'm sure when things are all right and the borders will open and we'll see international students coming back into the country. Thank you.
I think if I can just butt in there for a minute, it's again, it's a really interesting question. But I think we're all of us in the UK and in Australia, we're used to competition, and competition and how that competition changes. For example, with students traveling to perhaps non-traditional English-speaking countries, so moving to Malaysia, for example, a lot of students now going to China to study, Germany, other areas in Europe. I think from a UK perspective, the important thing for us is, and as I said when I was talking, that one of the things we cannot compromise on is quality. Because if UK education is ever perceived as the quality is diminishing, is dropping off, if in chasing the market and in chasing the recruitment, we compromise on quality, then our long-term competitiveness just disappears overnight. So I think in terms of, if you look at the Times Higher Education rankings, I know we all love rankings, of world universities, for example, and they tend to sort of rank the top 1,000 universities in the world. Well, how many universities are there in the world? There's about 20,000 or so, let's say. How many UK universities are in that top 1,000? It's interesting to challenge government ministers on this because they come and say, well, I don't know, 4, 5, what do you think? Well, the answer is it's around 100 UK universities are in the top 5% in the world. We can't compromise on that at all. So that always has to stay number one.
Yes, and not wanting to speak out of turn, but I completely agree with what both of you are saying that yes, it's been challenging. There have been new ways to operate for all stakeholders, whether it's students or university partners, because where we are sat as an organization, our stakeholders are both our clients and our students and parents, and we have duty of care to everybody. So I quite agree with what you're saying. We've got to look at the holistic picture, and it's interesting that you talk about competition, because gone are those days when we used to say, when we do a competitive analysis, that we're looking at a region or a country. Today, it is competition globally. And having said that sentence, I think we're set out to a new beginning. And in terms of what is going to happen, what is going to be the new normal, whether there is a pandemic or not in the next few months, hopefully, I'm very positive as a person, there will be a vaccine and we'll all be vaccinated in a better world. But this new way of learning and teaching is here to stay. So it's going to be, I guess, hybrid. It's going to be something which is going to give us the flexibility, because as an individual or a professional as well, for those students and for those counselors who are listening, it's been very nice to work from home. But I'm looking forward to going to work. But having said that, I also know that few months of doing that commute every day, there will be a point where I'll say, I don't mind having a day in a week that I have the flexibility to work from home. And similarly, for students' point of view, yes, it's that experience is priceless and it cannot be matched to anything when you are at the campus. It is so very important. But like Richard clearly articulated, that there may be some courses which require internships and require you being there. Others can be done at home. And what Prashant said, that it could be a joint. So that is the sentiment we're looking at, even as a consulting firm, where we will have the luxury to work with various clients across many geographies and time zones, that we are just getting more adaptive and resilient. And we will hopefully come out of it being stronger individuals to face any other challenges that may come up. Sorry, I didn't mean to take time, but Are there any other questions? I think there is some more which have come up. Person has, yes.
Yes, so I can see a question from Ritu Sharma. Are there any alternate course options students might be looking at post the pandemic?
I think, yes, it's a fantastic opportunity for the students, the parents, and the counselors to look at beyond those traditional courses as such. Not everyone has to just be a doctor or an engineer as such. There are plenty of other courses out there, and things are changing. Especially if you look at this particular scenario where everything's gone digital, digital marketing is something which has gained an importance all of a sudden. And yes, anything you talk about, anything in the health side as well, and as very well articulated by Richard as well, nursing is something you'll see. Even we are experiencing a lot of that sudden spike in applications in any health-related programs, especially courses like nursing, the public health area. I think, and then also looking at the new NEP policy that India is working on, where there's a lot of focus being put on the vocational side of things. So I think there's going to be the shift as such. I think areas like social work, early childhood education, hospitality and tourism, we will see the students' interest slowly shifting from the traditional engineering and the doctor mindset to these areas as such. So that's what I'm foreseeing will happen in, I would say, in the next couple of years. Thank you.
And I think the other way of looking at it, as well as the subject area, is mode of delivery. So the blended learning model that we've put in place, because we've had to put it in place, is online education's, let's face it, has not always had a good reputation around the world. It's not something that people particularly want to do. Some of the quality of what's being delivered isn't always the highest. Having said that, as I say, University of Derby Online has been around for years and years and delivers overseas. We have that. What we're starting to see is demand now for a kind of blended learning internationally, where, for let's say, take a 3-year undergraduate degree in the UK, students would be able to study, let's say, the first year or the first 2 years remotely in their own country, and then travel to the UK to do the final year. And there are obviously cost advantages in doing it that way. And one of the things we're looking at very closely in Derby is to ensure that there is equivalence between our online delivery and our on-campus delivery, so that there is no difference in quality between those two modes of delivery. So, for example, our Masters in Psychology online and our Masters in Psychology face-to-face is exactly the same program. There is no compromise there whatsoever in terms of quality of delivery. And the ability to move from one to the other, that flexible delivery, is something that I think we may be able to learn from this going forward.
Yes, that was quite an interesting response. In fact, more than what vocation the student might want to take, even I have seen a shift in how parents are looking out for their children in India. Parents at this stage, after class 12, after +2, are still in the decision-making mode as when it comes to choosing graduation universities for their students. And I saw a shift in many parents where they chose courses based on where they want to send their child. And it was surprising, they were following the news, seeing how countries are reacting to the COVID, and wanted to choose locations where they felt their child might be safe in future, So there is there is an interest in new vocations, and also how countries have reacted to the COVID, to the pandemic, and are they looking out for their students, their citizens. So location has also been a huge motivator for different university choices. We can take one last question from Usha Joseph. UK universities teaching methodology has been project dissertation based. How do you think this will be looked into in a blended learning approach? I think so. That question will be for Mr. Said.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily going to affect the dissertation side of things, but the project side of stuff, obviously this relates back to the question of internships, work experience. Some of our programs, for example, can do a work experience with academic review as opposed to a dissertation. I don't think, again, I can answer this one directly. It depends on subject. Again, we'll see where we are in the future. It's something clearly that we have to look at. It's something that is a real positive of hands-on education. I think University of Derby has always prided itself on being an applied university, a university that is very connected to industry and to the workplace. We just have to hope it comes back, or eventually we're going to have to find more innovative ways of doing it.
Thank you so much to our panelists, Mr. Richard Said and Mr. Prashant Prasanna, for this for their lovely addresses. It was very heartening for me to know that universities are really thinking about their students. They are investing in the future, and they are braced up for any eventuality. At least 2020 has taught us to be on our toes from now on. And I think this all the counselors listening into us today will carry this message back to the students and be able to tell them that all is not so grim, and they can look at opportunities at studying, at least in Australia and in the UK. So it was a lovely session. Thank you so much, Ritika, for this opportunity. And over to you, Ritika.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Sahai. Indeed, it's been a pleasure, and I think it's been learning. I completely agree with what Dr. Sahai has signed off with. It's been enlightening to understand what university partners have been doing in this space, whether it is the block learning or the extensive support Derby is doing. So for not only the colleagues and the various stakeholders on this call, but I think others will also value once we share the recording of this session. In a completely global world, I know you have all accommodated with time zones to listen in and tune in. I would request you to stay tuned in for our next session as well, which will be talking more about what the new normal is going to be and what countries holistically are doing together to support the community. On behalf of SONMS4, Dr. Sahai, Richard, Prashant, I can't thank you enough for enlightening our counselors and us as a team and being on our panel. And in case there are any other questions that do come up, we will take the liberty to share them with you, if that's all right. And we will then pass that out to our audience for today. So without further ado, I know, Prashant, it's late in the evening, and Richard, you have a day ahead. And Dr. Sahai, for us, it's mid-afternoon, so we can look forward to the weekend, and thank God it's Friday. Thank you very much, and stay safe and stay well. Goodbye.